And now on the line is Ben Kelly, a spokesperson for VICA, which stands for Votes for Irish Citizens Abroad, and Ben is also working with the campaign group VotingRights.ie. Ben, welcome to the programme.
Thanks for having me.
Ben, I last spoke to you on Near FM in 2019 about the planned referendum on extending voting rights in Ireland to Irish citizens living outside the Republic of Ireland. A lot of things have happened since our last interview, most notably last year's Irish general election, and of course we have COVID-19. I know the planned referendum is in the news this week. Could you start off, Ben, by giving our listeners a summary as to where things stand at the moment and what has happened since our last interview?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I suppose the most important thing has been that after the general election of 2020, we had obviously Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil and the Greens going into government together. And in their programme for government, they have included a commitment to holding this referendum. And that's very positive because obviously, new administrations come in and they may drop promises or forget about things that were in the past. But no, all these parties are committed to holding this referendum within this 5-year period. And furthermore, in November, we had the diaspora strategy, which was released by the government, which is their plans to sort of better embrace immigrants living abroad. And again, of course, the referendum was included in that. So we now have a clear signal that there is going to be a referendum on extending voting rights in 2022 or 2023 at the latest. That's where we're at. It's now starting to pick up again in conversation, and that's a really good thing, I think.
Okay, that's great, yeah. And I know Simon Coveney was talking about it recently. We'll talk a bit more about the campaign in a minute. Today is my fourth time to cover the VICA campaign. Can you tell me who VotingRights.ie are?
Yeah, absolutely. VotingRights.ie is largely a US-based group, and it's comprised of the former Senator Billy Lawless, who was the Senator for the Diaspora in the Shannon in the last term, and also with Kevin Sullivan, who is part of the Washington Irish Programme and the Clinton Institute in Dublin. So much more of a US-based group, whereas VICA, which I'm a part of, is more UK-based. And obviously that's important because two of the biggest immigrant communities for Irish people are in America and in Britain. So we're quite modest groups, quite small groups, and yet we've got quite a lot of very important contacts. And I think that we've been slowly pulling those people together because there's just so much support out there for this cause.
You mentioned there that VICA are kind of more for Britain and VotingRights.ie are more for the US. Are there any organisations apart from the political parties canvassing in Northern Ireland on this issue, do you know?
There wouldn't be anyone separate, but there is a bit of overlap because, for example, I myself am actually back in Northern Ireland at the moment in the medium term, and VotingRights.ie have also taken on as their vice chair Emma D'Souza, who is a Northern Ireland-based campaigner and activist. So there are voices here outside of the traditional political parties who are sort of bearing up that campaign here in Northern Ireland, which is going to be very important, of course, because extending voting rights to Irish citizens primarily means to all the Irish citizens who are north of the border, before you even move on to immigrants elsewhere in the world.
And am I right in saying it's a big issue for the political parties like Sinn Féin, the SDLP in Northern Ireland?
Well, it's certainly a big issue for Sinn Féin, absolutely, and they've been very much leading on this. You've got Niall in the Shannon, and you've got Michelle O'Neill in the north. She's also leading on this, and we have had also very positive contributions from the SDLP. There's quite a few people in there who are keen on this, and we've had some positive overtures as well from the Alliance Party, and obviously the Greens are in government in the south too, so we can count them in. So it's quite a broad spectrum of people already in Northern Ireland who are interested in this, as well, of course, as a lot of the civic groups who are emerging, such as Ireland's Future, who are kind of talking about where we go in the future of Ireland outside of politics and outside of traditional groups. And that's a big thing that's emerging in Northern Ireland, and we're very glad to see those voices getting on board with this as well.
Okay, we talk about the latest news now. I believe there was an e-conference held this week, wasn't there?
Yeah, that's right. There was a big conference on Monday just past, which VotingRights.ie had organised, and I was very, very glad to help them with that and to participate myself. And we had an address from Minister for Foreign Affairs, Simon Coveney, who, this was an issue very close to his heart. And we also were speaking with the Minister for the Diaspora and the Minister for Reform, as well as many of the political parties, many activists, and hundreds of people tuned in. So it was really quite a promising start, I think, to launch this campaign.
And can you tell our listeners, for the benefit of those who haven't heard, what Simon Coveney said at that conference?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think he reiterated that, the government and obviously Fine Gael have this global Ireland strategy. They want us to sort of remember our immigrant community around the world and to bring them back into the fold. And there are many ways they're going to look at doing that. But in terms of democracy, in terms of the election, he wants all Irish citizens, wherever they are in the world, to be able to vote for the presidency. And he mentioned how important the presidential office is to be extending to other people, because it's not like other political offices. It's a symbol, it's the head of state, it's someone who represents all of us. And I think they see that as being a very important token. I use that word not in the negative sense, but a way to bring everybody in and say you can be invested in our democracy wherever you are in the world. So it was great to see him there. It was great to hear him talking about that. And of course, he reflected also on his sort of pleasure at President Biden being in office and the great work that we're going to do between Ireland and Biden's administration in America.
And there is some talk, I spoke to you about it before, I believe, of, I know the referendum is going to be on extending presidential voting rights, but there's also talk about maybe giving immigrants a number of seats in the Senate or something like that, isn't there? Is that a separate issue, or what's the story?
Well, yeah, that's a separate issue. I mean, at the moment we are only concerned with the referendum on presidential rights. That's the only thing that we've got on the table. But we did release a poll this week which looked at quite a number of issues, and the poll was very positive because it found that 56% of people wanted people in Northern Ireland and the UK who were citizens to be able to vote, and 52% wanted Irish immigrants all around the world to be able to vote. And just to kind of test the waters and see what people felt, we did also ask the question of having Seanad representation for people in Northern Ireland. And very interestingly, 49% of people said yes, and only 43% saying no. But there was less support for giving Seanad seats to immigrants abroad. So that issue is obviously not on the agenda at the moment. If it's going to happen, it's very far away. But that was an interesting thing to see where people stood on that. But of course, the good news is a majority wanted to extend the vote for the presidency, which is where we are.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about the opinion poll. It must be reassuring, I imagine, for your campaign, VICA and VotingRights.ie, to have the support of all the parties in the Oireachtas, and according to a couple of opinion polls now, the majority of people in the Republic of Ireland in general on this issue. It must be kind of reassuring, yeah?
It absolutely is, and this is the second year in a row that we have seen polls showing a majority in favour of extending that vote. It's a slim majority. It's 56% for Northern Ireland, 52% for immigrants around the world. I'm very much aware that can change, but I think that's a number we can build on. And I also think that, the situation we're in at the moment, particularly in terms of the pandemic, and, we've all got people who are family members and friends who are around the world and so on. And I think we do want to keep that connection with our citizens abroad, our friends and family, and everyone does have a special investment in the presidency. We do see ourselves reflected back in it. So, of course, it's important that we see these polls moving in a positive way in the Republic, because, of course, at the end of the day, it is people of the Republic who will be voting in that referendum. So we want to keep an eye on those polls, and we want to keep winning over more people who are undecided, and maybe even win a few people back who are against it.
Okay, Ben, I think you mentioned at the start of the interview, but when the referendum is going to be announced, it probably won't be announced this year, or could be announced this year, could it? But could be for next year. Is that the way it is?
Yeah, I think because we keep being told sort of 2022 or early 2023, I think that we'll probably not be looking at this in earnest in the Dáil until middle or later of next year. Because, of course, when you do bring legislation for a referendum to the Dáil, you've got a very short window then afterwards in which to hold the referendum. So I think I'd be keeping an eye on maybe the autumn slot in 22 or the spring slot in 23. So, you know, it seems far away, but these things do creep up, and I think we'll want to get all of our eggs in a row long before that time.
Okay, Ben, to come towards the end of the interview, is there anything else you want to tell our listeners before you go on there, FM?
Well, I think that if you are listening and you really support giving a vote to all Irish citizens in the presidential elections, then please reach out to VICA or to VotingRights.ie or to myself. Get involved, see how you can help, and spread the word that this is a very good thing to support.